Today is Friday, November 14th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. 2 Christian missionaries have been killed. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We're glad you're here with us, getting through the news of the day each and every weekday bright and early. With me today, CBN's Trey Goins-Phillips and Billy Hallowell. And Billy, on the focus story, we're looking at this Greg Laurie event that we mentioned this week.
Yeah, this is really interesting. We had a chance to talk with Greg all about the event, what he's hoping to accomplish, so we'll get into some of that today.
All right, looking forward to the details on that in just a moment. Also, on the main thing, Jen Lilley joins the program to discuss Hollywood being her mission field. So all of that and more coming up on today's episode of the podcast. Make sure you're checking out all of the CBN News podcasts we have. We've got the links for them right there in the description. We'll put them in there every day for you. Make it easy for you to click and like and subscribe and follow and all that good stuff. So with that, we are going to head now to the news in 90 seconds. And 2 Christian missionaries, a father and a daughter, were killed when their small plane went down in Coral Springs, Florida, as they were flying relief supplies to Jamaica in the wake of Hurricane Melissa. Alexander Worm, 53, founder of Ignite the Fire Ministry, and his 22-year-old daughter, Serena, were the only passengers on board. Friends say the pair were on a mission of mercy, heading back to the island they'd already helped once since the Category 5 storm devastated the region. Worman spent his entire life training young people for evangelism and across the Caribbean, and was described as a man who gave his very self to others. Serena was remembered as a beacon of compassion who followed closely in her father's footsteps. And Nashville continues to see a major influx of Christians and ministries from across the country. Census data shows more than 130,000 new residents have moved to the Nashville metro since 2020, pushing the population above 2 million. The region grew 6.4% in 2024, outpacing the national rate of about 3%. Realtors report large numbers of newcomers arriving from California, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New York, citing affordability, no state income tax, and expanding employers like Amazon, Oracle, and HSA. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And look at that. Wouldn't you know it? You make business-friendly laws and rules and tax codes, and the culture also friendly and not hostile and crime-ridden and underfunded police, and look at that, it grows. And people are fleeing places like California and New York. It's interesting to note the places that people are leaving from, and they're landing in areas like Nashville.
Well, I was just in Nashville like a week ago, and I came back and I was obsessed with moving there. So when I saw this article that we had done, I was like, oh my gosh, for all the reasons that the article states, but also you get a real sense of, not just all the business things you mentioned, there's a real sense of Christian community there. Not that everybody's a Christian, but it's just a totally different feel while you're there than I'm used to in New York. So I came back trying to convince my whole family to move there. So that's where I'm at. Pray for me, everyone.
I can't remember who it was, but I saw a conservative podcaster share a meme the other day, and it was something going on. It was the New York City mayoral election is what it was, and it was like a post of all these more red states and popular cities. Nashville was one of them. It was like, it's full, you can't come here, it's full, like we can't take any more people. And the meme was talking like, so often people flee to these places and then they end up bringing their politics with them. So I think that's the one danger, is like moving to these cities and then they end up just as progressive as the city you're fleeing from. But I think it certainly is encouraging to see cities, like you were saying, Billy, not everybody there is a Christian at all, but there certainly is, I think, a Christian ethic in a large part of the community in Franklin and in Nashville. And that's encouraging, right? It's great to see flourishing in places where those principles that we all know are true are leading to a city flourishing.
Yeah. And I think, listen, as things go on and things get more divisive, I think people are going to, especially become unaffordable. That's the last straw, right? Like when you actually cannot afford where you're at and it gets more and more painful. And then on top of that, the culture is rapidly changing in these areas. It's going to cause people, I think, to start looking for like-minded communities. And so we're seeing that happen right now. We'll keep an eye on it going forward. And we're going to go to the focus story now. And Pastor Greg Laurie is on a mission to bring hope and healing to Utah Valley University. So tell me about this.
Yeah, this is interesting. It's a Harvest Crusade event that Trey and I had a chance to talk with him about. And this is the university where conservative and Christian commentator Charlie Kirk was assassinated on September 10th. So the fact that they're actually holding a Harvest Crusade there is pretty interesting. Now, typically these Harvest Crusades take a very long time to organize. Greg said that they were planning on going to Utah, but not until 2027. So that was our initial plan. But after Charlie Kirk's assassination, that kind of changed everything. The Harvest team was reached out to and they were asked if, how they could help. And they sort of were saying, look, we really want you to come out here. All the pastors that were local, basically saying that the university, is struggling, that there's a lot of pain in the community after what happened. Why don't you come out here sooner? And so Greg said, yes, we'll come. And they started planning. And he said this is something they don't typically do. They ended up putting this together in like 6 weeks, this entire thing. Normally, it's a much longer timetable. In fact, he said they've never done this before. Normally, the 6 months it takes, there's a reason for that. It's a lot of planning. You have thousands of people coming, but they did this in just, 6 weeks. And so it's going to happen on Sunday, the 16th, and people are invited to go in person to UVU, or they can watch it at harvest.org or on the Harvest Plus app.
And so what did Greg say about how God has been moving after Charlie's tragic death?
Yeah, he talked about Charlie being in heaven. He said that, one of the reasons they chose to do this event was that there was this unspeakable act of darkness that took place, and they wanted to shine the gospel, right? That Charlie cared about the gospel. They wanted to shine the gospel on that campus and point people to Christ. And he basically said that what we've seen, and we've talked a lot about this on the show, is an outpouring after Charlie's death of faith, of people asking questions, of Jesus sort of being something that a lot of people who maybe hadn't thought about him before were suddenly interested in. Not just because I think of what Charlie spoke about, that is a big part of it, Charlie sharing his faith, but I think when somebody like that is killed in such a horrific way, you start to ask questions, right? Why? Where was God in this? What does this mean? What is the meaning of life? And so we're seeing a lot of young people ask those questions. And, so he's seeing that happen. And Greg, and feeling that call to be out in the world, preaching the gospel in light of watching that revival unfold.
And so we were just talking a few minutes ago about Nashville and culture and how things are shaking out now. What did Greg say about the state of our culture right now?
Yeah, this is interesting because, obviously we have both spiritual revival and we have cultural decay, and they're happening simultaneously, and it's confusing to people. But he said it's a lot like what happened in the 1960s during the Jesus Revolution. He talked about the rioting, the upheaval, the protests, the fact that there were assassinations, President Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy. There were a lot of things going on that he said actually mirror where we are right now. And at that point in the 60s and 70s, he said God sent a Jesus revolution. And so we're kind of watching that happen again right now. He said the promising signs are all around us. Yes, there's persecution. And he said when God is at work, the devil will always oppose it. But he said, I've read the last pages of the Bible and that there's good news. We win in the end, so we should not back off. We should not slow down. We should accelerate and do as much as we can while we can. And so I thought that was a really good word. Like, now is the moment to dig in.
Yeah. I mean, I think what people are maybe feeling is there's been a backlash a bit from what we saw on 2020 and beyond, where it was this sort of widespread, just massive advancement of far left progressive ideology. And I think you're seeing a backlash to that now. And people are just saying, Christians are saying, like, listen, I'm not going to tiptoe around anymore. This is not worth it, because why are we dancing around? Why are we having to be quiet about our view when everybody else is just ramming their view right into popular culture? And we have to be the careful ones, and we can't offend anyone with what we say. but nobody else has to care about that. So I think those days are over, or at least they're maybe on their last legs. If there's any of that still around where people are just saying, you know what, I'm done with the political correctness, and it's just not worth being half-hearted about what we believe.
Part of boldness is exactly that, not sacrificing on or compromising on the truth, Dan. And I think another part of it is, and this was something that Greg spoke to, is as Christians, we shouldn't expect everybody to come to us, right? I shouldn't expect, and there's nothing wrong with inviting a friend to church. I think that's fine, but that shouldn't be our MO. Like the first thing I do is, well, I want you to come to me. I want you to come to my church. It's let me go to where you are. And that was what Greg was saying. He's like, we want to go and meet people exactly where they are. In this case, literally, right? He's going exactly to the city where there was such a horrific tragedy that took place, and there's so much darkness that they're dealing with there. So I thought that was just a convicting challenge too. Is am I doing what I can not only to speak the truth boldly, but am I going out? Am I going to be present with people where they are, whether that's abstract or literal? That was an encouraging challenge, I think, and something that we can all apply to our own lives in different capacities, but something we can all take a lesson from.
Final thoughts, Billy?
There's a lot of distractions in life. There's a lot of things happening right now. There's a lot of fighting going on in conservative movement, and I'm sure that on the liberal side as well. There's a lot of chaos around even the Charlie Kirk situation. Everybody needs to pull back and focus on what matters most, getting people to heaven. We are very distracted in life right now by a lot of things that are actually not the main thing. And so we should be making the main thing the main thing. And that's convicting for me. And really anybody listening, all of us, we need to get back to that. The people around you, your friends, your family, they need to get saved. That's what matters.
Yeah, that is top priority. Keep our minds focused and fixed on Christ and eternity. And that is, of course, the most important thing. So appreciate that and that conversation. And we're going to head on over to the main thing now. And Trey caught up with actor Jen Lilley about how she views her work in Hollywood as a mission field and how she stays sensitive to the prompting of the Holy Spirit in her life. That conversation is today's main thing.
So talk about what it was that drew you to Hollywood and how, and I've heard you say this several times, you said it in conversations that we've had too, that you view your work in Hollywood as a mission field. So talk about why you went into Hollywood and how you do truly rely on the Holy Spirit to guide you in your interactions there.
Okay, so to keep it as short-winded as possible, because you know, Trey, I can just stay here all day and talk to you about it. Hollywood is upstream of culture. So if you can bring light into Hollywood and into storytelling and into media, you can actually help shape and influence culture, which is very important to the Lord, because people are important to the Lord. So I love storytelling. I love it for many reasons. One of the reasons I love storytelling is because it makes me a more empathetic person. For example, I played this really wild character on Days of Our Lives. If you did not know me and you did not know my testimony, you would look at that and say, how can the girl who played Teresa Donovan, you know, that drug addict, one night stand girl on Days of Our Lives, how can she write a devotional? Like, I even had a fan the other day. I thought it was so funny. I heard you got saved. I was like, no, sister, I have been super crazy wild about Jesus since I was 9. But I played that character because Holy Spirit told me to, which was wild because I was not going to do it. I judged Teresa as hard as like one normally maybe would, because we're looking at it through human eyes. But the Holy Spirit said to me when I was like, no, I'm not going to do this role. He said, this is your role. I was like, I thought I was testing the spirits. Like, I was like, surely this is not my God. So I can't say no, Lord, because that's an oxymoron, but I am going to say why. And I'm going to trip you up and I'm going to expose you, you foul devil. That's what I was thinking in my mind. And the Holy Spirit said, because Teresa Donovan was in because Teresa Donovan is the exact same condition that the world was in when I sent my son to die for them. And that audience needs to know there is no pit so deep that my love cannot find them still. And when the camera holds on you at the end and the guy leaves and the drugs wear off, you will play the reality of what that girl is really feeling, which is empty and void because she did not find me. And that's what she's seeking. So I love storytelling because it makes me a more empathetic person. it is so easy. And I think it's such a trap of the enemy as believers to, instead of putting on the righteousness of Jesus, like we are clothed in the righteousness of Jesus, we have right standing with the Lord because of Jesus. It is in a trap of the enemy that we can kind of easily fall in to become self-righteous. But there is no righteousness apart from Jesus. Like our righteousness is filthy rags before the Lord. So I love going in and not only loving the audience and telling a story through that. And Teresa had this really redemptive story on Days, which was wild and was totally the Lord. And I got to reach the audience like nobody's business because of that testimony. So many people were like, man, I didn't go to church anymore until I heard why you did that role. Like, incredible. It's so amazing. But also it's for the people on set. Like, who else is going to go into those co-stars and the actors and the people, the crew, and be like, you have value. And I don't value you because you're famous. I actually see you because the Lord sees you. And this is what he's saying to you today. So I love going in there, kind of flipping the narrative that it's like, I don't actually want anything from you. I'm not career climbing. Like, I love acting. I hope I get to act for the rest of my life. But I've actually discovered I actually enjoy supporting roles more than lead roles because there's so much less pressure. And I love championing other people. Like, it's not the Jen Lilley show for me. Like, it's the Jesus show. So I love going in there and just kind of loving people well, especially Hollywood, who somebody always wants somebody. They always want something from a famous person. I'm like, I don't want anything but to love you.
Yeah. Tell us about your own encounter with the Lord when you were 9 and 10 years old and how that led you to a relationship with him.
So when I was 9 years old, my family and I were Catholic, which I'm not saying is not Christian. This is just where I was. And our priest moved to a different parish across the state of Virginia where I'm from. And so my parents were looking for a new church to go to because the new priest who came in was teaching purgatory or limbo. And then at the other church, they were, both were teaching either purgatory or limbo. My parents knew enough of the word to be like, this is not actually biblical. Where are we going to go? And they were starting kind of church shopping. My mom's eye doctor invited her to an Episcopalian church called Church of the Holy Spirit. It's still around in Roanoke. It's a great church. And so we went because my mom was like, okay, Episcopalian's like the closest, it's like the cousin of Catholicism. It's like the Protestant version. And so we went, and I thought worship was really lively, at least as a 9-year-old who grew up in the Catholic Church. Like, I remember there being drums, and I remember people clapping, and I think even raising their hands, in 1993. And I was like, this is wild. This is kind of fun. Like, this is like, are we allowed to do this in church? I thought that was pretty cool as a kid. And then we dismissed and went to Sunday school, and the lesson was on Elijah and the widow with the oil and the flour, which, if anybody doesn't know that story, the widow only had enough flour and oil. There was a famine in the land, which Elijah had actually called down with the Lord. And there was only enough flour and oil for her to make one more cake for her and her son to die and eat. And so Elijah said, like, God's going to multiply it basically, but like, first give me some bread and oil, which is like, there's a whole sermon in that. It's amazing. And what happened is, miraculously, there was only enough flour and oil, but every day there was more flour and enough oil, just enough flour, just enough oil, which is totally also like a sermon. I mean, like, our daily bread, like, that is a daily exercise of trust. But it was so cool to me because I remember sitting in the class and being like, wait a second, somebody outside of the 12 disciples and Jesus and Moses, like, who I would consider like the bookmarks as a child, like, those were the people I had learned about, had the Holy Spirit, operated in miracles. And you're talking about the Old Testament, like before Jesus, before the unfair advantage of the Holy Spirit being indwelling in us. What else does this crazy book say? So I remember I backed up. I read all about Elijah and Jezebel and Ahab, and like, he outran chariots and horses. I mean, he calls down fire from heaven. I mean, Elijah, the story of Elijah is wild. And then you get to Elisha, his successor, and he has the double portion. I was so jazzed about this as a 9-year-old that I was like, what else does this book say? This is crazy. So I literally got out my first communion Bible from when I was 9. I think it was New King James Version, not an easy version to read, and a yellow Crayola crayon because I didn't have a highlighter. And I just privately would go down into my parents' basement and just like, I would use my crayon like a bookmarker to be like, all right, I made it through this chapter. And I would just like the next day I would open the Bible and be like, where have I not colored? And I read it cover to cover in the year of turning from 9 to 10 because I'm a summer baby. And I mean, it was just funny. Like people would be like, hey, Jenny, do you want to ride bikes? I'd be like, I'm in Leviticus. I can't, you know what I mean? So but I took the Bible at its face value. I mean, because I was like, Lord, if Elijah can do this, and that's before the Holy Spirit, then like, can't you do this kind of stuff through me? I mean, I've never called down fire from heaven, but like, I would like to if I needed to, you know, like
I'll give it a shot. You know?
Yeah. I mean, like, let's go. So that's kind of been my faith walk.
All right, appreciate that conversation there. And that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
We are looking at Ecclesiastes 3:11 today. It says, God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end.
We don't know everything that God is doing and why things are happening and how he's going to use things. And so that's where our faith comes in, just resting in him no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. And 100%, that's how we can have faith going forward, is we can trust in him who knows all things, sees all things, and everything ultimately unfolds according to his will. So we can be at peace with that. All right, that's going to do it for this week on the Quick Start Podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com and faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back here on Monday with more. God bless. Have a great weekend.